They don't stay because they're weak. They stay because they're loyal to the version of you they first believed in. That's the part no one understands about INFJs. When they're hurt, they don't immediately run. They observe. They hope. They give you chances you never earned because they're trying to save the connection they built in their mind, not the one that's actually in front of them. And the whole time, something inside them is slowly shifting, silently, invisibly, toward an ending you won't see coming. The truth is darker than people think. INFJs remain long after they've been wounded because they need to understand why. Why the energy changed. Why the person faded. Why the bond they nurtured so carefully cracked without warning. They stay to collect emotional data, to confirm their intuition, to give the universe one last chance to prove them wrong. But once the evidence becomes undeniable, something in them snaps. Not loudly, not angrily, but with a cold, final clarity. And in that moment, they don't leave to escape you. They leave because they finally return to themselves. Before you scroll, answer this in the comments. Do you stay too long? Or do you leave too fast once your truth becomes clear? Write the word clarity if this hit you in a way you can't explain. INFJs stay after being hurt because they need emotional clarity, not closure. They are not waiting for apologies, excuses, or explanations. They are searching for the truth beneath the wound. For an INFJ, hurt doesn't immediately trigger escape, it triggers analysis. Their mind begins mapping emotional patterns, replaying conversations, and decoding motives the way others might study a complex riddle. They don't stay because the pain doesn't matter. They stay because the pain is pointing to something deeper, a lesson, a revelation, a shift they must understand before they can walk away without leaving pieces of themselves behind. Their attachment doesn't end just because they were harmed. It ends when their inner world has answered every unanswered question, when intuition and reality finally match. In those moments of confusion, the INFJ becomes both participant and observer, standing inside the relationship while simultaneously stepping outside of it to examine the emotional architecture. Their heart wants to heal, their mind wants to know why it broke. This duality keeps them in places where others would have slammed the door long ago. They are not weak, they are searching for coherence. They need to understand whether the wound came from misunderstanding, misalignment, or a deeper truth about the other person's character. And until that truth fully forms, they cannot leave cleanly. They refuse to abandon a chapter if they don't understand the lesson it was meant to teach. Their staying is not loyalty to the person, but loyalty to clarity. They cannot move on with emotional debris still unresolved, because unresolved pain becomes a pattern, and INFJs study patterns with almost spiritual seriousness. So they endure the discomfort, the silence, the distance, waiting for the internal click that tells them, this is what it meant. This is why it happened. Now you can go. And when that moment arrives, they walk away not because they are hurt, but because they finally understand. And understanding, for an INFJ, is the real closure. They hope the person will return to the version they first connected with. This is the silent truth INFJs rarely admit out loud. When someone hurts them, their first instinct is not to leave. It is to search for the person they once saw beneath the surface. INFJs do not fall for who someone is. They fall for who someone has the potential to become, for the glimpses of depth, kindness, or vulnerability that appeared early in the connection. When the behavior shifts, when warmth turns cold or honesty turns evasive, the INFJ doesn't immediately accept the change. Instead, they begin scanning for the original spark, the tone in the voice, the softness in the eyes, the sincerity in the gestures. They hold on to that memory because to them, it wasn't an illusion. It was a truth that became buried under fear, stress, ego, or emotional disconnection. Their hope is not naive. It is rooted in their ability to see multiple versions of a person at once: the hurt one, the healed one, and the one hidden beneath defense mechanisms. They believe in who someone could be, often long after that person has forgotten how to be that version themselves. So they stay, watching for micro moments of the old self: a rare apology, a softened expression, a quiet admission, a moment of effort. These fragments convince them that the relationship is not fully lost, that the emotional bridge can still be rebuilt if both sides reach for it. But over time, the INFJ begins to understand that hope is not the same as reality, and potential is not the same as partnership. The grief comes not from losing the person, but from losing the vision they once believed in. It feels like mourning a future that will never materialize. And slowly, painfully, the INFJ realizes the truth. The version they loved was either temporary, situational, or something only they ever saw. When that realization finally lands, hope dissolves. And the moment their hope is gone, their attachment follows. And that is when the INFJ walks away, not from who the person is, but from who they once imagined them to be. They stay to confirm whether their intuition about the relationship is right. INFJs do not leave the moment something feels wrong, even though their intuition often whispers warnings long before anything visible happens. Instead, they remain in the relationship to test the accuracy of what they already sense. It is not doubt in their intuition that keeps them there. It is the need for emotional confirmation. They want to see whether the shift they felt was a temporary imbalance or the beginning of an irreversible decline. Their inner world operates like a quiet investigative system, watching patterns, measuring tone changes, studying emotional withdrawal, tracking inconsistencies, and comparing current behavior to the connection's earliest foundation. They are not staying because they are blind. They are staying because they see too much and need to understand precisely what they are seeing. Every moment becomes data. The pause before a reply. The change in energy when they enter a room. The emotional distance that grows without explanation. The way promises become vague and affection becomes inconsistent. INFJs wait because they want to be fair. They want to rule out stress, fear, misunderstanding, or temporary emotional misalignment before concluding that the relationship is truly unraveling. They need clarity that cannot be obtained from confrontation alone, clarity that comes from observing someone's authentic behavior when they believe the INFJ is still stable and invested. But the longer they observe, the more undeniable the truth becomes. They see the pattern solidify. The emotional effort is one-sided, the connection is no longer reciprocal, and the relationship asks them to shrink while offering nothing that sustains them. It is only when the evidence aligns perfectly with the intuition they felt from the beginning that the INFJ quietly closes their heart. And once the internal verdict is reached, their withdrawal becomes inevitable. They do not scream, they do not argue, they do not demand closure. They simply honor the truth their intuition revealed, the truth they stayed just long enough to confirm. They give chances long after others would walk away, believing growth is possible. INFJs do not hold on because they are weak. They hold on because they see potential long before it becomes reality. When someone hurts them, their first instinct is not to run, it is to understand. They remember the moments of sincerity, the early connection, the genuine parts of the person that were not filtered through stress, fear, or emotional defenses. INFJs believe deeply in transformation, not as a naive fantasy, but as an intimate understanding that people often act from wounds they have not yet learned to name. So they stay, giving space for growth, waiting to see whether the person can rise to the version of themselves the INFJ first saw. They choose patience over punishment, compassion over retaliation, and hope over abandonment, even when it costs them. Their forgiveness is not blind. It is deliberate. They watch carefully. Is the apology real? Is the effort meaningful? Is the change consistent or just a temporary performance to keep the connection alive? The INFJ evaluates quietly, looking for signs of emotional evolution. They offer second chances, third chances, and sometimes more, not because they cannot let go, but because they want to be absolutely certain they did not walk away from someone who was capable of becoming better. They understand that growth is rarely linear, that people stumble when learning how to show love, and that emotional maturity takes time. Their patience, however, becomes a double-edged sword, because while they believe in growth, they also track its absence. And when the same wounds repeat, when promises collapse into patterns, when the behavior reveals no trace of transformation, the INFJ's hope shifts into clarity. They finally see that the person is choosing stagnation over evolution, comfort over accountability. And in that moment, the INFJ's compassion turns cold. The chances they once offered freely disappear, replaced by quiet resolve. They do not leave in anger. They leave because the growth they believed in never appeared, and they refuse to lose themselves waiting for someone else to become who they could be. They endure pain quietly to understand patterns, motives, and emotional truth. INFJs do not suffer in silence because they are passive. They endure because they are studying the emotional architecture beneath the hurt. When someone wounds them, they do not immediately react, lash out, or retreat. Instead, they turn inward, observing the dynamics with a depth most people will never comprehend. Every shift in tone, every change in effort, every inconsistency becomes data. They are not looking for excuses. They are looking for truth. They endure the discomfort because they want to understand what the pain is trying to reveal, whether it exposes a pattern in the other person, a blind spot in themselves, or a deeper emotional imbalance within the relationship. Their quiet tolerance is not acceptance of mistreatment. It is a diagnostic phase, a way to gather clarity before making a final decision that will be irreversible. While enduring, they pay attention to what the other person does when they think the INFJ will stay no matter what. Do they take responsibility? Do they change? Do they even notice the pain they caused? The INFJ observes without announcing their observations. They listen to the gaps between words, the apologies that lack depth, the promises that echo but never transform into action. They are not waiting for the hurt to stop. They are waiting for the truth to surface. INFJs understand that people reveal themselves most clearly in how they handle someone's vulnerability, and so they stay just long enough to see the real character behind the mask. But this endurance has a boundary, one that, once crossed, changes everything. When the INFJ gathers enough evidence to confirm the true nature of the relationship, their silent endurance becomes silent closure. They no longer ask questions. They no longer hope for change. Their emotional doors begin to lock one by one. And when they finally walk away, the person often wonders why the INFJ left out of nowhere, never realizing the INFJ had been quietly reading the truth the entire time. They only leave when their inner world no longer recognizes the connection. INFJs do not walk away because of one argument, one disappointment, or one moment of pain. They leave when something far deeper shifts, when the emotional landscape inside them no longer reflects the bond they once cherished. For an INFJ, connection is not based on convenience or routine. It is rooted in resonance, in a feeling of alignment between souls. When that resonance fades, it is not sudden. It dissolves slowly, quietly, like a light dimming, day after day, until the INFJ realizes the warmth is gone. Their mind may try to stay, their loyalty may insist on understanding, but their inner world, the place where they hold people with immense emotional gravity, no longer responds to the relationship. That internal silence becomes the signal. Once an INFJ cannot feel the connection in their intuitive core, the bond becomes unrecognizable, almost foreign, as if they are standing beside a memory instead of a person. This shift doesn't happen because the INFJ stops caring. It happens because the connection stops being emotionally safe, nourishing, or authentic. Their intuition begins to show them every moment where they swallowed their needs, softened their boundaries, silenced their truth just to maintain the emotional equilibrium. They start to see how much of themselves they had to shrink to keep the relationship alive. And once they see it, the dissonance becomes unbearable. The person in front of them no longer matches the version they once loved. The emotional mirror is shattered. The INFJ feels it viscerally, as if their inner world rejects the presence that once felt familiar. By the time they decide to leave, the INFJ has already mourned the relationship in silence. They've processed the loss privately, layer by layer, until nothing inside them responds to the bond anymore. And when that emotional recognition dies, the INFJ's departure is inevitable. They don't slam the door to hurt the other person. They close it because the connection, in their heart and intuition, simply no longer exists. When they finally walk away, it's because their identity has healed past the relationship. INFJs don't leave when the pain is strongest. They leave when the pain has finally taught them what it needed to teach. Their departure is not an emotional impulse. It is the quiet conclusion of a long internal evolution. By the time they walk away, they have already reclaimed parts of themselves they had lost while trying to keep the connection alive. At first, they stayed because they believed loyalty meant holding on, even through discomfort. They stayed because they hoped the other person would grow with them, match their depth, or meet them halfway. But healing has a strange, powerful effect on an INFJ. It reveals who they became despite the relationship, not because of it. And once their healing outpaces the emotional space they shared, the relationship can no longer contain the person they are becoming. An INFJ's identity rebuilds slowly, quietly, in the background of painful moments. They start recognizing their worth, their needs, and the boundaries they had blurred to keep peace. Piece by piece, their inner world strengthens, not through anger, but through clarity. They realize the connection required them to shrink, soften, or silence themselves. And when their identity heals, they no longer fit the mold the relationship once forced them into. It is like outgrowing a skin they never felt comfortable wearing. Suddenly, the INFJ can see the emotional truth with clean eyes. Staying would mean betraying the person they have worked so hard to become. So when they walk away, it is final not because of resentment, but because returning would undo their healing. They are no longer the version of themselves who tolerated emotional imbalance, confusion, or unreciprocated effort. Their healed identity does not seek permission, validation, or explanation. It simply moves forward. They walk away not to escape the past, but because the future they have rebuilt within themselves no longer includes the patterns that once held them back. When an INFJ finally walks away, it's never about rejection. It's about resurrection. They don't leave to hurt someone. They leave because they've finally remembered who they were before the pain. And once that identity returns, there is no version of them that ever looks back. If you're still watching, you already know this truth hits deeper than most people will ever understand. But now I want to hear from you. Have you ever stayed long after you were hurt, hoping something would change? Reborn, awakened, or done? And if this spoke to you, subscribe to join a community that understands the psychology behind INFJs, Sigma INFJs, and the quiet power you carry. Your journey isn't over, it's just beginning.